So about a week ago, I sent out a survey for all of you to fill out, and of the 15 that responded, many of you believe that discrimination in the workforce among women still exists today. But the startling statistic from your survey was that less than 50% of you actually knew what woman discrimination was in the workplace. So, and I was the same exact way. When I put on my Facebook profile that I was a computer engineer at Cal Poly, ads like this would pop up on my Facebook. And this one in particular is about GE trying to cut the gap between men and women in the workplace. So right now, GE has about 18% of its employees being women. And in an article by Business Insider, GE says it will place 20,000 women in tech by the year 2020. And so with this, I thought, how could discrimination still exist? Because they're doing so many advances to try and fix it. And obviously, you know, they want women in the workplace. And more companies like this exist now. Places like Microsoft, IBM, and Intel are donating hundreds of millions of dollars to try and fix the gap between men and women in the workplace. And those are just only a couple companies doing this. But as the year went on, I started seeing posts like this. So this article is a blog from a former Uber engineer. Her name is Susan J. Fowler, and she wrote about being sexually harassed at Uber to the point where she actually had to leave after only a year or two. Things like they would be in a work group chat to discuss ideas and future projects at Uber, and one in particular instance was when a man would say, hey, we should have sex, we should do this, I'm in an open relationship, like, I really think that we should have sex. And this all happened at her job multiple days in a row and to multiple women. So with this, I just thought, you know, maybe the problem still exists, and it definitely does. So one thing, but that article actually wasn't the reason why I chose to do this topic. It was an article I read in The Atlantic called Why Silicon Valley is So Awful to Women. And all of us know Silicon Valley. I'm not even from California, and I know what Silicon Valley is. It's where all the huge tech companies are. And in this article, women talk about, even though they're COOs, co-founders of companies, they will go to tech conferences, be in an elevator on their way up to their hotel room, and a man will touch them inappropriately. Or before they go and present at tech conferences, men will say, hey, don't worry about it. You're hot. You'll be fine. No one expects you to do well. And so, and with this, of the interviewed women, 60% of the women said that they had to swat away sexual harassment, and then a third of them actually felt like personally scared for themselves and feared for their personal safety at work. In a dissertation by Gabrielle Goodman, she also says that 40 to 70% of women have been sexually harassed in the workplace, but less than 5% report it. And this can be due to multiple reasons. And a lot of it is how women portray themselves and how people portray women. So how people portray women, this is actually a graph from Rate My Teacher, which all of us are very familiar with. It's where you can go on and rate your teacher, pretty self-explanatory. And this is for different subjects. The orange represents the woman and the blue represents the men, and it's how many people were called brilliant in these topics. And as you can see, men very much surpass women in the use of the word brilliant in comments. And this is very evident in other cases as well. So in an article called The Truth About Discrimination in Science from 6 female professors from Cornell were interviewed, and they said that often they feel like they should have points added onto their evaluations because even before students walk into the room, they already have an idea of what the teachers are going to be like. And often women are called bossy or even just helpful, whereas men are called brilliant and knowledgeable. And it's funny because we actually need women in the workplace because but a CNN article said that if the amount of women work today that were working in 1979, we would have lost 1.7 trillion in economic output in 2012. And just to give you guys an estimate, that's about Canada's GDP, gross domestic product, right now. But it's not only how men portray us in the workplace, it's also how we portray ourselves and self-esteem. So recently I went to a panel called Imposter Syndrome. For those of you who don't know what imposter syndrome is, it's basically where you walk into a place and you assume that everything you think is right is actually wrong and that the people around you know a lot more than you do. And at this panel, there were women from Amazon. There are professors there. People have gotten their PhDs. People have gone to grad school, had years of education, and yet when they do group projects at their work, they still don't feel like they can voice their opinion because they think the people around them know better, and they don't want to embarrass themselves. And a good comparison, actually, is with transgender people. So there was an article by Jessica Nordell titled "Why Aren't Women Advancing at Work?" And it was about people who had transitioned from being a woman to a man. And they talk about how when they were a woman, people would ignore them. They would, brush them off. They wouldn't listen to them. Or they would say, "Are you sure that this evidence is correct?" when they were explaining something. Then when they were a man and people didn't know that they were transgender, one person said he was surprised because when they went into meetings, people would write stuff down, and he was not used to that at all. And just this transition really proves the difference between men and women in the workplace. Now, I know I talked a lot about, women being segregated, and yeah, I'm totally biased because I'm in a major where about 0.47% of the people in the major are women, and I've definitely experienced this bias too, but there's one idea I want to leave you with. I recently watched a TED Talk about gender equality in the workplace, and this man was a professor for gender equality, and he said that at one point he walked into a room, and one man said, "Finally, someone who isn't a woman who can tell us about gender equality," because the professor that he was guest speaking for was a woman. And in this TED Talk, he said this: if it was a man up here talking about gender equality and talking about women in the workforce, would you have a different idea of it? And would you listen more? And I just want to leave you with that thought, because if it would be different, then maybe that is the reason that women discrimination still exists in the workplace. Thank you.